This is you. You are one of the wretched. And everyone else thinks you're wretched and doesn't like you. So what they do is you throw you overboard and then you end up landing on this big huge island thing. And then you end up with a companion, which is somewhere over here somewhere. Like that. And then your companion follows you about. And then you know, they kind of help you all the way through your journey where you're trying to end up being vindicated. And that's pretty much the story of Vindication. Look at the size of that box. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculously huge. The island's huge. The components are pretty big. This is everything else that you get in the box. Look, there's tons of it. And yeah, I've got thoughts on it. You know, as you know, we've had kind of like Mark and Lacey and Tom on the show, kind of like, well, you know, a couple of times now, because we're kind of, you know, we kind of know each other. And it's taken far too long for me to get Vindication to the table. It's one of these things where it looks, something like this looks very, very big, and it also looks very, very daunting. So you're in the position where you're kind of like, well, is it going to potentially take a long time to kind of play? And yes and no is the kind of the answer to the question, because this is a kind of unusual game that is almost like Scythe. And what I mean by that is when you saw, you know, when you saw the box for Scythe, you thought it was all about big mechs fighting each other, and what it ended up actually being was a kind of a really clever kind of resource management game where the end of the day, you actually ended up kind of probably winning because of your popularity as opposed to the metal might. And Vindication in some ways kind of does that. It kind of not like a catfish type thing where it's pretending to be one thing and actually being something else, but it is more of like a Euro than it is a traditional kind of adventuring game. For instance, like this person here, they look like an explorer, and in the important part, they're really just like a kind of like a first player token, really. It's all about kind of cubes, and it's all about build as a horrible person, changing your potential into your influence, changing that influence into conviction, and then using your influence to gain yourself kind of different powers across the board, gaining knowledge, gaining vision, gaining strength, gaining courage, and gaining inspiration, and even things like wisdom. You combine, say for instance, knowledge and inspiration to create yourself some wisdom, and you use the various kind of skills that you have and talents that you have to kind of travel around this island with. That kind of doesn't start off as a kind of a, it starts off as an empty map, and then you're drawing kind of tiles as you go, and then you can kind of use your influence in order to kind of gain extra things from the tiles in the hope that it helps you fight a monster, or increase how quickly you can move, or you can try and control an area if you want to as well. And it's all kind of, it's very, very straightforward. And I mean that by being very, very straightforward, in the fact that it's very rare we have to kind of, I guess, look at the rule book, or look at the rule book once you get going. Because for something that looks kind of overly complicated, there's your turn sheet. That, you know, that's it. You know, there's a couple of things you can do in a turn. There's a couple of more things you can do in a turn. There's a kind of a additional thing that you can do in the turn. So it moves very, very much around from being kind of like a, almost like a potential exploration and exploring kind of thing, into then it starts to be about kind of managing your resources in order for you to kind of gain kind of honour. And the honour will then help you to go up the kind of the score track. And I mean, this is the Kickstarter version, so some of this might not be, but I mean, you've got like little metal coins here, which are delightful. I've got little metal kind of standees instead of the standard cardboard ones. It doesn't take away from the overall presentation in the game, because the game itself is still very, very big and you get an awful lot of it. The idea is, as you're going around picking up more honor, increasing your courage, your strength, your vision, your inspiration, then you're basically essentially you're kind of wanting to convert your inspiration, your courage, into kind of proficiency. And proficiency is like a little tableau. It's one of these. So this is what you're trying to get. This is kind of like your currency. Yeah. But you can use that again, once you get, say, your inspiration, proficiency, and that becomes yours, you can trade it in. But then at the end of the game, you might not want to trade it in, because your scoring track is based on who's got the most inspiration, who's got the most courage, who's got the most strength, who's got the most kind of honor points at the end, and it all kind of works together. Bear in mind though, it's not as straightforward as that, because on top of that, when you start the game, it's random. Nobody starts off with the same condition. You pick up a journey card, which is your first thing, and that tells you what you're meant to do. So in this case, I get my starting spot where I've got to start. I've got to draw. In this case, I'm drawing a random yellow, inspiration companion card, and then I've got my blocks that I've got to place down on my potential, my influence, and my conviction. But overall, on top of that, if you put that back where have you gone? You've gone there, right? On top of that, you also get a secret quest as well. So this tells you what to concentrate on. So as you're playing, everybody's exploring the island, but, for instance, for this one, you've got to be able to control a monastery at the end of the game. Or you've got to have 0 potential in your potential sphere at the end of the game as well. And what that does is that gives you additional kind of honor points in cases of this is 2 and 5, and that can make a big difference between kind of losing and kind of winning, which is really, really interesting. When does the game end? That's a really, really important one, because normally in these kind of Euro style, and it is a kind of a Euro style type game, because you are going around building your points in order to kind of be the person with the most points at the end. It's no different from potentially, Power Grid, or you could even say terraforming Mars in that respect. But you've got endgame triggers. Now, the interesting thing about endgame triggers is that they differ. For instance, when one player controls four regions more than each other player, the next round becomes the final round. And they're all random all the way through. It's kind of like that. They can vary. And what that does is, endgame triggers, you start off with a couple. I mean, this one says, when one trait more than the number of players has been acquired, the next round becomes the final round. But these, you get more kind of endgame triggers coming into play as you go around the board, and you and people advance. What it means for the game is that so you can finish a game in 45 minutes, or you might finish a game, you might keep going with the game and for a couple of hours as the end game triggers. People just decide they aren't going to go for the end game triggers, or try to build up the score as much as possible. We managed to get the game kind of set up, underway, and going within about 10 minutes. Even explaining the rules wasn't that difficult, because it was just a case of, okay, well, there's your player's turn. This is what you're meant to do. So, surprisingly enough, for something that kind of looked that complicated and was one of the barriers for bringing it to the table, it was surprisingly simple to set up and to play. And, I mean, you see the dice here. I mean, the chunkiness. I mean, these are fantastic. This is battling. And you can kind of say that for all of the component quality within the game itself. I mean, wherever there's been a possibility that the quality could be maybe slightly improved, that they've not gone for maybe the standard stock. I mean, everything even down to the shape of the cards here. I mean, there's kind of like, it's a slight unusual shape over what you would expect over the norm. Okay, so what do we think about it? Well, let me tell you what I think about it. So what do we think? Well, and that's what I think, really. But for those people who aren't psychic, the thing about Vindication is it's very, very well presented. There's obviously been, this is a game where Orange Nebula have decided they're going to put a game out there, and they want to kind of put the best game they can kind of out there as much as possible. And that has meant basically making fantastic components, basically making unusual type components. A game box that when you open it up is presenting you with game trays and additional figures and ways to organise the gameplay so that you can get it to the table as quickly as possible. That was an exciting thing about. There wasn't really any much mucking about to actually get ready and getting played. The gameplay itself is very streamlined as well. I mean, having such a small roster of moves, but having the ability to kind of do so many things with those moves was kind of refreshing, and it meant that, say, the one person that I kind of watched the video and the one person that had never ever played it before was able to kind of get going and understand and actually able to move from just going, right, what do I do next, to saying, well, actually, I'm going to kind of adopt this strategy to win. And that is kind of brought in the fact that you've got the secret quests. So the secret quests almost kind of drive you to take certain actions in a certain way, whether that be controlling like the library or controlling an inn or making sure you've got the most proficiency and wisdom. It is kind of driving you to take certain actions to kind of push you forward. And that means that you can sometimes see what people are trying to concentrate on and gives you an inkling that potentially how you could be blocking them. At the same time, everybody's trying to get the proficiencies around the edge of the board, because at the end of the day, when the end games trigger, people want to have those proficiencies in place because so they score as many points as possible. The only concerns I have is people maybe thinking that they are walking into some kind of role-playing game as opposed to walking into what is, in all fairness, is pretty much a kind of a Euro game where you're using your resources to kind of affect the end game scoring at the end. And some people might feel a little bit scythed by that, expecting some kind of D&D role-playing game, and then getting something which is more akin to kind of like resource management and kind of light Euro point scoring. But again, during the game that we had, you were able to bring in kind of jokey elements of roleplay. I control all the inns, I control all the entertainment, I control all the beer kind of thing. So, again, it depends on kind of who you're playing with. The only other thing that was potentially going to cause any issues is the endgame triggers, which I don't remember it being something that that I've seen played before. Usually in terms of a Euro, it is a case of you play 10 rounds, you play 7 rounds, you play it until the deck is finished, and then you kind of score points. With the end game triggers and Vindication, it means that traditionally in Euro games, if you're playing like the first to 10 rounds, you'll get somebody that's always building up their last rounds to round 8, 9, which is when they're essentially kind of cashing in on their strategy that they have played throughout the game. Vindication leads to a point where you're almost forced to cash in your honor as you go as quickly as possible, that you have to grab proficiencies, that you are looking to have the most kind of wisdom, you are looking at having the most kind of knowledge, just in case the end game triggers, because you're not all in control of it. It could be somebody decides, well, I'm going to cash out early and that's it, game over. Or you could be everybody tries to persuade, kind of has an agreement to kind of keep things going as long as they possibly can. As the points rack up, more end game triggers are brought in, which again, leads to potential negotiation. Do we want to keep this going, or does somebody sneak in like we did in our game, and I just sneaked in and said, right, I'm going to gain the proficiency on this, and that meant that the game ended in the next round. and there was a beautiful mad dash for people to kind of score as many points as they could in terms of honor, so they could claim being the winner, being the one that was fully kind of vindicated. For some people, I think that might cause a level of frustration. Somebody who is the type of person that needs to know when a game ends. There might be some people that might not be fully happy with that, and that's to kind of be expected. You enjoy what you can, and you're not going to necessarily enjoy everything that kind of comes along. It means it's a little bit kind of fresher for people that have stayed away from kind of Euros and are looking for something that maybe marries a little bit of role playing with a little bit of Euros as well. The other thing is, as well, is we've only scratched the surface as far as Vindication goes. There is the kind of the Monuments expansion that's already included in the box. There's like treachery cards. There's the ability to just go ahead and start battling monsters, which I think there was one fight in the entire game, which that was a thing that happened, and that was it. It wasn't a consistent thing, but there are campaigns where you can just continually fight monsters. This year there was the entire new there was the Vindication went to Kickstarter again with a new series of expansions, so it looks like it's going to be something that's going to stick around for a long time. I'm interested in getting it to the table. I'm also kind of not worried about getting it to the table with people who haven't played it before, because, as I say, one of the barriers was maybe getting it to the table was looking at the setup, looking at the game and went, how easy is this going to be to teach? And how many people are going to look at this and think they want to kind of play it? Now we've easily taught kind of 2 people to play it. I can see them kind of being able to say, nah, it's easy. It takes 10 minutes to learn, and then you'll be off. What's, I guess, my only concern is, different levels, as normal, different levels of proficiency, somebody coming to a game from ground zero. But then again, because the beginning companion card is random, the journey card is random, the secret quest is random, and the endgame triggers are random, you can potentially have, veterans playing with people who have only played it for a couple of times, and they're still going to get the kind of the old fun and excitement and the scramble as well. These are all things. I mean, very, very positive about, what the potentials are, and it's definitely something that I kind of would like to get to the table again. That's Vindication, Orange Nebula. They've got their website, they've got their podcast, they've got their Twitter. Make sure you check out all of their channels. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, hit the, I don't know, it says about here. There's a subscribe button. Click it, bing, and do the bell and whatever. If you want to hear more about me ramble, go to the podcast, which is on the channel as well. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, the usual stuff. Until the next time, this has been We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. This is a sideways glance at Vindication. But until the next time, goodbye.